So in the last part, I'll talk about this last part of this arrows between the Qualia structures, such as sound or face or motion or color, and this proposed integrated information structure or causality structures. How do we manipulate or examine this, related relationship? Okay, so here's the exemplar face Qualia and also compositionality. And most likely these are generated or related at least to the face form face areas neurons. And idea here is that integrated information structures generated by this, 4 neurons or 4 population of neurons or whatever, we still don't know. There is probably some kind of combination of the integrated information, and they are potentially corresponding to this structure of the face experience. To any kind of experiment is always necessary to test the hypothesis, and one of the promising paradigm, I think, is this rewiring experiment. This is a quite radical kind of experiment, but it has various interesting properties. So what we did, what the Marian Clutter in MIT did roughly 20 years ago, is that in a normal brain, the eyes or retina actually extends thalamus, LGN, and also speria colliculus, as we discuss in the context of the blind side patient. And then from LGN in particular, that axons goes into the visual cortex. That's a sort of the normal visual system development. On the other hand, the auditory system that we haven't talked much has a completely different kind of structure, and then ear, then the cochlear extends the axons into brain stems and so on, and then eventually goes to this inferior colliculus, and then that projects the axons into MGN, medial geniculate nucleus of other part of the thalamus, basically. So the lateral and the medial geniculate is actually close in the distance. And then from MGN, axons goes into auditory cortex, and then that generates this, auditory cortical areas. And then what they did is in this rewired animal, they cut the connection to the speria colliculus first, and also they induce some kind of branching from normally going to speria colliculus into MGN. And then that resulted in this rewired animal whose axons goes from MGN to auditory cortex, which are actually responsive to visual stimuli. So here, they also cut the connection from the auditory cortex in auditory apparatus, like a cochlear, to MGN. So auditory cortex in this case developed like an auditory cortex. And this was done mainly in ferrets, and then they performed also the various interesting kind of the behavioral experiments. So in terms of the cortical physiology, what they found in this Nature paper is that within this visual cortex of the ferrets, the V1 neurons generate standard cortical map and also orientation preference and so on. And this is a very standard kind of map preserved across animals. And then each of the neuron in V1 located here in the soma, the neuron body, extends axons and also dendrites around its neighborhood, but also it extends to somewhere far away. And this kind of neighbor plus far away kind of connection is very important for building this lateral connection of the visual cortex. And that's the kind of thing that model neuron system that the Hon and Tononi kind of simulated in this 8 neuron line experiment over there. But leaving aside, this critical thing is that the rewired A1 cortex. So rewire the A1. Now this ferret actually received the visual input, and then that gets projected into the auditory cortex. And then there, the auditory cortical neurons also demonstrate when they use the optical imaging, cortical map that looks like, but it's deformed in the visual systems, okay? And then compared to the neuronal projection or connection pattern in the standard normal A1 neurons, which is only like, highly densely connected to neighbor only, rewired A1 neurons show, here's a cell, cell body. It has this extended kind of, dendrite pattern, which is very similar to V1, visual cortex. So this means that local neural connectivity and the structures and the potential activation pattern itself of the auditory neurons now became similar to visual systems, but it's not quite identical, okay? Then what happened, or what they did in an ingenious experiment, in von Melcher's experiment. By the way, this paper is 2 papers and published in the same issue of the Nature, which is just amazing. And it happened only, a few times, I know, in the my history of the science. But anyway, so what they did in this behavioral part of the experiment is that to put the ferret into this part, and then presented they either light pattern onto the right side or left side, and then also sometimes they also presented the auditory stimulus through this speaker, and then they trained the ferret using this normally developed hemisphere where no rewiring has been operated. They trained the ferret to go into here when they hear auditory sound, and then go to the right side of this reward spout when they see light, okay? So if it's vision, go to the right. If it's audition, then go to the left. And then ferret learn this very quickly. It's very easy discrimination. And then the critical question they asked was, what happens for the first time when they present the stimulus to the eye of the rewired brain? So now the visual stimulus goes through the eye, and then that gets projected into auditory cortex. The other side of the auditory cortex is that standard auditory cortex, and the visual cortex doesn't receive the input directly from there. But what happened was that ferret actually reported, seeing here. So now the rewired auditory cortex seems to at least be consistent with the hypothesis that this based on this changed connectivity and also causality structures, now they can generate a visual experience, and that's what the ferret reported. And I'm saying not only this particular experiment, but also this kind of experiment or application has been done in humans where the experience is restored or changed by the rewiring or sensory substitution. In these kind of situations, newly extended or acquired connections, as long as they seem to be similar to the original sensory experiential apparatus, it can generate a qualia of the original modality, even if you are using auditory cortex or visual cortex or somatosensory cortex. So in summary, once qualia structures and causality structures are obtained, in the future possibly, we need a mathematical theory to test their correspondence. And I'm not talking about this particular part, but in other papers, if you're interested, I'm talking about this kind of stuff, category theory. But the important thing for this lecture is that to understand this structural relationship between qualia structures and the causality structures, there are many empirical paradigms that can be used. Rewiring paradigm is one that I briefly talked to today. But individual differences and also synesthesia, congenital blind, and many other things can be actually used to test the structures or structural correspondence between qualia and causalities. And this is a highly promising direction of the future experiment. Okay, so concluding remarks. First of all, congratulations to all of you to finish this course. And this week's quiz is going to ask again, like last 2 weeks, it's going to be easy. And so don't worry about it too much. And the last part, I'm going to briefly give you a sort of the overview of societal impacts of this, type of the consciousness research. First of all, so the consciousness research, as you might be able to imagine, has a direct influence on the clinical implication. Sensory substitution or restoring the qualia through brain-machine interfaces, as I mentioned, in the last section, is active area of the research. And also consciousness meter, like we talked last week, perturbational computation, perturbational complexity index is another active area of the research. The photo that I'm showing here is a boy who was hit by the car and then went into a coma. And the parents and doctors actually thought that this boy is never possible to recover. So all of them kind of signed the contract for the organ donations. But this particular boy actually recovered his consciousness just 1 or 3 days before the operation. And since then, he is now completely recovered and then playing basketball and things like that. But at this moment, we still don't have a good way to predict the recovery of consciousness after the traumatic brain injury. And these types of the clinical application is requiring definitely the understanding of how the consciousness is supported by the neural activity. Another things, the direction academic curiosity type sort of question is, the mind-matter relationships or whether the laws of physics are enough to explain consciousness, but also development and the evolutionary aspect of the consciousness is also quite an important topic. Like this newborn babies are going to increase, preterm babies are going to increase due to the medical, advancement. And also we are increasingly, aware that many animals outside of the human or, a distant kind of, phylogeny, like octopus, seems to show highly intelligent behaviors. And also flies and also bees also show some evidence of cognitive capacity. And whether they are conscious or not, and if so, how similar their consciousness is, or how different they are, can be a very important questions for the animal ethics. And speaking of animal ethics, this engineering technique, bioengineering technique called organoid is also becoming a quite important issue. So right now, we are now able to keep the brain of the pig alive, putting the brain itself outside of the pig's body for 2 weeks or more. And also we can develop this organoid, which is coming out of the stem cells and then develop the brain-like structure on its own without a body or a blood vessel or something like that. That part we will artificially kind of supply. And then this starts to become like, philosophical thought experiments that people have thought for a long time. When the brain is floated onto the vat, do they actually experience consciousness? And if so, can we actually generate such things, or can we do this kind of experiment ethically? This is a kind of a question also again related to, or at least attached to the consciousness research. And also finally, this is a figure from science showing that there is an already futuristic kind of era that robots are substituting some of the human labors, and the more that inside of the mechanics of this robotics becomes intelligent, using artificial intelligence, things, then they might start to speak like humans, and it may feel like you may feel this entity as more conscious than non-speaking patients and so on. And then in this case, what do we do in terms of again ethics, or what we can do with this, for the engineering or commercial purpose and so on, becomes important. And the brain-machine interface is also possible to move these robotic stuff through your recording of the brain and so on. And how much of what we can read out of the brain, consciously or non-consciously, is also another matter of the debate. And to enable all this consciousness research, we do need an interdisciplinary research. And sometimes you may feel you may heard that we need an interdisciplinary research. But in the case of the consciousness, it is not just like nominal or phrase, but it really requires an interdisciplinary research and collaboration. And I myself have some kind of background in neuroscience, but did the psychology and also read the philosophy and collaborate with these people. But also through this interest in consciousness, I also learn and also collaborate with the people who are studying this evolution, cognition, language development, pharmacology, and clinical science, and then biology, and also to make it applicable into engineering. Collaboration with the engineer, computer scientists, and also physicists, mathematicians, artificial intelligence, robotics, and information theory is becoming more and more important. So into the future, you may see that consciousness research extending into different kind of fields, and also if you are working not in the consciousness research right now, but in these surrounding areas, maybe we'll have potential collaboration into the future. So the concluding remarks. I first wanted to say that the views I provided throughout the course are highly simplified, and I realized that I probably misled some of you guys, and also gave you biased information. But you do as a sort of the introduction to the consciousness research, I thought that this kind of bias is never avoided. So I just went ahead and then finished it. But I just wanted to say that there are a lot more to learn, and also there are many things that can be told, and you do need to go from here by your own to develop further understanding. And also, I used to say this at the beginning of the lecture until the last year, but this year I tried not to say that. But almost everything in this course material is likely to be revised in the future. And this is not a bad thing, but it is a more sort of the property of the science itself. Even, my previous mentor, Joe Bogan, who did the split brain experiment in the since 60s to 70s and so on, he said that except for anatomy and mathematics, all he learned when he was in a university was changed, and before he died. So he strongly recommended to learn mathematics and anatomy. And I would say that even anatomy and mathematics also changes, because science improves, including mathematics and so on. And as I mentioned, the category theory that I'm learning over the years seems to suggest that there has been definitely progress and also change, revision even in mathematics. Similar things definitely happens for the psychology, neuroscience, and also information theory and so on. So this is a rather exciting thing that you are going to find out into the future. And finally, consciousness is so fundamental that people may not even notice how mysterious its relationship with brains. And when I give this kind of talk to lay people, it's quite interesting, but some people never get why the question of brain and qualia are mysterious. it's if things are so fundamental, then some people just can't get why this is a problem. But hopefully, through this course, I hope that most of you get why this is so weird. And as such, due to this nature of the consciousness as a topic, it would be good material for you as a psychology student to improve your skills to be critical and also empirical and also quantitative and logical about these facts. Don't take initial your impression as it is, but also don't also trust whatever other authorities said, including myself. But you can actually empirically test your own experience and then think about why you are experiencing the things in the way that you do. And that's the kind of attitude that is very important for your future, regardless of whether you are in academic or outside of field. And I hope that you enjoy the class, and good luck with your future. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll see you again. And I just want to thank the members and also the collaborators in the past and current and future for making this possible up to now. All right, see you until the next time.